I'm Hindol Sengupta. I've written many books, but this one is really, really special. Not only is it about the Ashtavakra Gita, it's called Life, Death, and the Ashtavakra Gita, but it has given me the rare honor of working with somebody who's a living legend in the world of studying religion, theology, Sanskrit texts in India. Dr. Bibek Debroy, who I consider in many ways a mentor, not only to me, but many of us who try to work in this field, is the only living scholar who has in their own lifetime translated both the Ramayana and the Mahabharata from Sanskrit to the English language and is now meticulously going through the Puranas and other similar texts of Hinduism one by one. Dr. Debroy, Vivekda, if I may say so, thank you very much. It's been a rare honor.
Thank you, Hindol. It was wonderful to work on this book together. I hope there will be many other books that we work on together.
It'll be a rare pleasure and honor. Thank you very much, sir. Vivekda, I want to begin by asking you, the Ashtavakra Gita, I still remember when we were sitting in Goa and talking about working on this book. Now, I had gone through a very difficult period with the illness of my father and so on and so forth when I was reading the Ashtavakra Gita, and it had a profound influence on me. You have done a lifetime of tremendous work of looking at these texts and their, spiritual and philosophical import. Why is the Ashtavakra, according to you, so special?
I'm not ducking the question, I'm postponing the question.
Okay.
You use the word Gita,
Yeah,
and people immediately think of the Bhagavad Gita.
that's right.
Gita is anything that was sung,
Yes.
anything that was chanted, anything that was recited. The reason the Bhagavad Gita is called the Bhagavad Gita is because the Bhagavat is an adjective. Bhagavan, Sri Bhagavan, Krishna stated it, hence Bhagavad Gita.
That's right.
Which itself suggests that there are many other Gitas. There are about, at least, no one has sat down and counted, there are at least 200 Gitas floating around.
Yes. You yourself have translated the Bhagavad Gita.
I have translated the Bhagavad Gita and I have translated 25 other Gitas from the Mahabharata, which has been published as a book called Sacred Songs.
Yes.
So there are Gitas from the Mahabharata. There are Gitas from the Puranas, like the Uddhav Gita from Bhagavat Purana. The Devi Gita from Devi Bhagavat Purana is almost a mirror image of the Bhagavad Gita. The Ishwar Gita from Kurma Purana is also almost a mirror image of the Bhagavad Gita. In the Mahabharata itself, there is another Gita that was stated by Sri Krishna to Arjuna known as the Anugita. So there is a vast corpus of Gita literature that people are not aware of. As I said, probably about 200 different Gitas. I have not even mentioned the ones that are in the minor Puranas or the Upapuranas. The Ashtavakra Gita is a stand-alone Gita. It does not belong to any other text. There are references to the sage Ashtavakra in other texts, including the Mahabharata. The Ashtavakra Gita does not tell us anything about the sage Ashtavakra. Nor does it tell us anything about King Janaka. Janaka is not the name of one particular king. So when one hears King Janaka, it does not mean Sita's father. Because that entire lineage of kings was known as Janaka. The Bhagavad Gita, though it is a revered text, is somewhat indirect in its message. Well, not that I believe in these neat silos of Gyan Yog, Karma Yog, Bhakti Yog, but there is Gyan Yog, there is Bhakti Yog, there is Karma Yog. At the end of it all, you might say, what exactly has Sri Krishna said? Ashtavakra Gita is extremely direct. It comes and hits you right there. Whether you understand it, whether you accept it, whether you realize its message or not is a different thing. It's an extremely direct Gita, and it is about Advaita Vedanta. It ostensibly is between Ashtavakra as the teacher and Janaka as the disciple or Shishya, but increasingly it becomes a dialogue between two equals. That's the reason it is so very important.
One of the things I felt when I read the Ashtavakra Gita, and which you alluded to, is the sheer directness of it all. It is not couched in a story. There are no dramatis personae in a sense, giving it shape. There are no subplots or subtexts and so on and so forth. And like you mentioned, in many ways, this is a conversation between, at the very least, near equals, if not equals. Raja Janak himself being an enlightened character, should I say. And it sort of distills down the message, like you also mentioned, right to its absolute core. It's not slowly, roping you in. It is hitting you on the head. There's this thing about the Ashtavakra Gita which says, when all spiritual texts and everything falls silent, Ashtavakra begins to speak, in a sense. I found the Ashtavakra Gita to be particularly stark and useful for a time when I, at least personally, was going through extreme difficulty in my life. And it allowed me space to see life and the act of living separately from all the turmoil, turbulences, and me coming face to face with near death of my father and all of that was happening. Talk to me a little bit about your idea or your understanding of what the distilled message of the Ashtavakra Gita is and what it urges us to do.
I think the simplest way to answer that question, if it is at all possible to answer the question, is to state what King Janaka says in the very first shloka. Janaka uvacha katham jnanam avapnoti katham mukti bhavishyati vairagyam cha katham praptam etad bruhi mama prabho. My Lord, please tell me, how do I get jnana? How do I get mukti? How do I develop vairagya? Jnana is knowledge of a certain kind. Who wants to know? Know about what? What is knowledge? Am I the observer? Can I ever be the observer if I am part of the system, if I am within the system? How can I even aspire to know about Jnana if I am within the system? At one level, this is sounding like Heisenberg. Mukti, mukti from what?
Yes.
From this sansar. But if sansar is an illusion, then what am I seeking mukti from? Vairagya, invariably it is stated as, translated as detachment. I don't like the word detachment because detachment suggests I was attached, now I am becoming detached. Vairagya is non-attachment. So this is a bit like Adi Shankaracharya's Drik Drishya Vivek, about who is seeing, what is being seen, what am I, and it knocks the bottom out of our entire edifice of what we perceive, typically perceive using the senses. It also goes on to say that if I can separate myself from my body, adhunaiva sukhi shanta bandha mukta bhavishyasya. I become free from bondage even now, right now. One of the most celebrated, one of the most cliched quotes of the Ashtavakra Gita is a shloka which says, if you think yourself to be free, you are free. If you think yourself to be bound, you are bound. Now, which is why I said earlier that it is very easy to understand what the Ashtavakra Gita is saying, but to try and imbibe it is extremely difficult. You mentioned the pain and the suffering that you went through. The pain and the suffering are part of realization. If you look at all our texts talk about tapasya. We invariably translate tapasya as austerities. Tapasya is not austerities, or it is not enough to translate it as austerities, because tapasya has a sense of scorching, a sense of burning, a sense of purification.
Because it comes from the word tap.
From the word tap.
Tap, yeah.
So, in every religion that I know of, in every dharma that I know of, there is this process of cleansing that happens. Whenever we go through pain, physical pain, and there are many people who have talked about this when they have gone through physical pain, when they have come to near death experiences, that somehow you tend to distance yourself from the body. Many of the things that are associated with the body are actually temporary. We cannot distance ourselves from the body. But in the process of pain, we tend to take a more detached view. It's almost like an out-of-body experience. And that is why it probably resonated with you at the time of pain.
You know, one of the famous analogies that the Ashtavakra Gita draws, that everybody talks about, but perhaps often inaccurately, is this whole rope and snake analogy. Right? I mean, it's very famous. That you may think that this is a snake, but in fact it is the rope. That we often mistake, the world and its, material objects, including our own senses, for things that it isn't. Talk to me about how you see this rope-snake analogy.
Again, there are different ways to react to it. The Bhagavad Gita uses two words, Sukham and Shanti. Sukham is happiness, Shanti is peace. The Bhagavad Gita says, Ashantasya kuta sukham. If you are not at peace, how can you possibly become happy? What are we happy about? We often define happiness in terms of possession of external objects or relationships with external people. So I am unhappy because Hindol has a lovely house, Hindol has a lovely car, that makes me unhappy. I am unhappy because of my relationships with my superior, my subordinate, my spouse, my parents, my children. Now these all define happiness with external connections. And all of these are temporary and transient. When you are 10 years old, you probably hankered after some toy that some classmate had, and you thought you would be the most happy person in the world if you had that toy. Today at this age, if you had that toy, it would not make you happy. So all of these notions of happiness are temporary, transient. This is the Bhagavad Gita. Ashtavakra Gita says that all of these relate to the senses, relate to the body. If you delink yourself from the body and delink yourself from the senses, you will realize that all of this is in your mind. You are merely an external witness to everything that is going on, and that is where you mistake. You look at a rope and you think it to be
A snake.
a snake. Ashtavakra right towards the beginning says, Mukti michhasi chet tata vishayan vishavat tyajya. O son, if you want mukti, if you want liberation, give up all material objects like poison. And it goes back to this notion of the body. I am not this body. I am not distinct, and this is Advaita Vedanta. I am not different from anything else in the universe. I am not distinct from the universe. I am part of the universe. I am the universe. The universe exists in me. I exist in the universe.
The other thing that the Ashtavakra Gita says again and again, and many people, I once had a conversation with somebody, in an ashram actually, who had also read the Ashtavakra Gita. In fact, had read a translation of the Ashtavakra Gita. And one of their problems was that, the Ashtavakra Gita again and again says, be happy. Now, it's all very well to say be happy. Most of us, if only it was so easy for most people. The Ashtavakra Gita doesn't say, apart from the fact that you dissociate from all material objects, including your senses, the Ashtavakra Gita doesn't have any prescribed route, so to speak, or route, so to speak. It only says that you must dissociate and be happy. And there is a constant reiteration that one must be happy. Now, a lot of people struggle with that because, well, yeah, sure, I can be happy, but, tomorrow I have my terrible boss, and today I have my child wailing, and my car needs servicing, and whatever, the mundanities and the irritants of our lives and the sadness and the sorrow and all of that, is there. How do you think we can bring the lessons of the Ashtavakra Gita in an applied mode, should I say, into the imperfect lives most of us lead?
I am going to use a slightly different word.
Okay.
And that word is Vigyan.
Right.
Which today we translate as science. So we have Gyan and we have Vigyan.
Got it.
Most of the time the words are used as synonyms. Sometimes they're used in different senses. The word Jnana is used when I gather the knowledge from a guru, when I gather the knowledge from a sacred text. Vijnana is knowledge that I acquire through inward contemplation and self-introspection. Often we look at Dharma, often we look at a text from the point of view of Jnana. What is it teaching me? What is it telling me? Is it going to tell me 5 simple rules for being happy? That's not the intention of a text like the Ashtavakra Gita.
Right.
So it does not have an universal template. Instead, it is treading the path of Vijnana. It is asking you to look inward and ask. It is telling you that happiness does not come from the external world. Search for that happiness within you. You said, I am unhappy because the car needs to be serviced, because so-and-so is doing that, so-and-so. The core question is, who am I?
Yes.
Am I the person? When I say who am I, that I must be a permanent thing. It cannot be Hindol Sengupta as of today. Yes. Because tomorrow the Hindol Sengupta will be preoccupied with other things. Now, I cannot define Hindol Sengupta in terms of the preoccupations of today vis-a-vis tomorrow, vis-a-vis the day after. So when I begin to ask who is the real Hindol Sengupta, it is like peeling away an onion. And this is Vijnana, this is inward contemplation. And then I begin to get an answer about who I am. And obviously, different people are at different levels of awareness. Not everyone is King Janaka. Ashtavakra had an easier time with King Janaka because King Janaka was already an enlightened person. He would have had a much tougher time with the likes of you and me. All of us are at different levels of enlightenment. So to what extent we imbibe that message, to what extent we internalize that message varies greatly from individual to individual.
As the Ashtavakra Gita is actually a very small text compared to, it's a slim text. Sri Ramakrishna famously told Narendranath Datta at that time to read the Ashtavakra Gita. And Swami Vivekananda had a very interesting experience reading it, and very transformative. Ramana Maharshi, of course, also urged the reading of the Ashtavakra Gita. But why do you think the Ashtavakra Gita is not better known, even though, people like Vivekananda and Ramana Maharshi, Osho gave a whole range of lectures about the Ashtavakra
Swami
Gita.
Chinmayananda.
Swami Chinmayananda.
It's not that short, by the way. It has 20 chapters compared to the Bhagavad Gita's 18. No, let me put it like
Yeah.
this. Uh, I tell you, Hindol,
Hmm.
there is some concept called sweetness.
Hmm.
You say, what is sweetness? I don't understand what sweetness is. So then I ask for a fresh lime with soda,
Hmm.
which is sweet. And I will taste it. You will taste it. I will say, see, that is sweet. You will say, now I'm in a better position to understand what is sweet. I now give a cube of sugar and say, Indol, taste this. This is sugar. This is sweet. And you will say, now I understand what is sweet. The problem is the average person can grasp the cube of sugar but finds it very difficult to grasp the abstract notion of sweetness. Advaita Vedanta is a bit like the notion of sweetness. The cube of sugar is a bit like my Ishtadevata, and I go along the path of bhakti. Bhakti, pure bhakti is most difficult, but bhakti is much easier to understand for most people than pure jnana, which is what Ashtavakra Gita is. Now, this is the reason why I think the Ashtavakra Gita is not read that much, except people who think it's the kind of thing that is fashionable to do, to say that, oh, I've read the Ashtavakra Gita, oh, isn't it profound? But other than people who have seriously traveled along the path of jnana,
Yes.
I don't really think anyone would have identified with the Ashtavakra Gita. And mind you, as far as I know, all the books on Ashtavakra Gita done earlier were done by people of a certain religious persuasion.
That's right. And that's why perhaps it was important to do one which was, in that sense, sort of non spiritual, at least from a non spiritual perspective. Now, the other point that I wanted to make was, and I think you said it beautifully, most people need a framework, to take your example of a cube of sugar. A cube of sugar is that framework through which we can approach our deeper selves, to put it in a sort of simplistic manner. That framework is helpful for us to make the journey. Now, of course, the Ashtavakra Gita, as it sort of proceeds, um, urges us to look at, the other great example of the Ashtavakra Gita is that, there are there are pots, right? And we often look at those pots and say, well, is it in the pot? And, Swami Vivekananda also said this famously, where is the Brahman? Is the Brahman in the utensil? Is it in the pot? What are you talking about, right? Some people get stuck at that point, right? Where, to tell them that, it's not even this and not even that, but it's also there and it's also there. So then people are like, well, is it there? Is it not there? Where is it really, right? I wonder how you unravel that, because like I said, even Swami Vivekananda had for a moment was stuck there.
I don't think it's very easy to unravel that.
Yes.
Because subsumed in all of Hindu darshan,
yes,
there are two issues which are almost taken for granted in the Ashtavakra Gita. They are not addressed directly in the Ashtavakra Gita.
Yeah.
But given the way our minds are trained, particularly influenced by the West,
yes,
we find both of these issues impossible to comprehend. One is the issue of cause and effect.
Yeah.
There has been intense speculation in our texts of cause vis-a-vis effect, and can I ever actually disentangle the cause from the effect?
Right.
For example, I see a reflection of the moon in a vessel of water.
Right.
What has caused the reflection? What is the cause? Is it the water? Is it the lack of a wind? Is it the moon? Is it the sun? Etc. etc. Ditto, in a sense, for a tree and a seed. So one is that. This, at least intuitively, we can understand cause and effect. The other one, which is impossible for our minds, trained, as I said, in the West, to grasp, is the notion of time.
Yes.
Our notion of time is not serial and continuous in the sense of a straight line.
No. No.
It is simultaneous.
Yes.
So the present, the future, the past all coexist. It's almost like modern cosmology of parallel universes.
Yeah. Multiverse. So to
Multiverse.
speak. Yes.
Now, if they coexist, then any timeline which has cause as something preceding and
Yes.
effect as something afterwards, it gets completely demolished. Let me think of another example.
Right.
Suppose there is, I don't know, suppose there is a red blood cell inside your body.
Right.
And that red blood cell asks another red blood cell, is there someone called Hindol Sengupta? What do you think? Will that red blood cell ever be able to comprehend that there is a Hindol Sengupta?
Quite right.
Let me give you another example. We actually cannot appreciate a 3D world.
Yeah.
We live in a 3D world,
But we can't comprehend.
but
it.
we comprehend a 2D world. The only reason we think it's a 3D world is because we have two eyes.
Yes.
Otherwise, we live in a 2D world. There was a gentleman who wrote a piece of satire, I forget his name, towards the end of the 19th century, called The Flatland. Flatland was about people who lived in two-dimensional worlds, and they were strictly hierarchical in the sense that dot was the lowest, a straight line was higher, a triangle was higher. The larger the number of sides, the more high up you were in the hierarchy. Into this world comes a sphere. The sphere in this 2D world appears initially like a dot, becomes a circle, and when it passes through the world, it becomes a dot again. The sphere is unable to explain to these people who live in a 2D world that there is a 3D world. Exactly similarly,
Yes.
a large part of the Ashtavakra Gita is trying to drill into us the message that you need to transcend
Yes.
what you think you are.
Yeah.
And you need to realize that you are the Sakshi, you are the witness. Try and elevate yourself above all of this, and then you will truly realize who you are.
Correct. And that's, of course, not easy to do at all. As the Ashtavakra Gita comes towards the end, it is, it begins to question even things that in, common day understanding or commonplace understanding of everyday spirituality we take for granted, right? The idea of morals and ethics, the idea of God, the idea of, any notion of everyday spirituality, the idea of right and wrong. At the end, there are all these questions whether Ashtavakra Gita is saying, what is this? It doesn't mean anything. What is this? It doesn't mean anything. What is this? It doesn't mean anything. For some people, when it's almost like neti. When you begin to eradicate like this, many would wonder, well, can I actually even do that? And if I do that, then really what is left? Now, of course, the answer would be what is left is the real sort of self. I wonder what sort of, for the lack of a better word, shift in our perspective. And because you spoke about multiverse, I think it's important to talk about this. Shift in our perspective would allow us to do this neti process, as the Ashtavakra Gita clearly seems to urge us to do.
I have two kinds of responses.
Sure.
One is the response that I gave earlier.
Yes.
We depend too much on our senses,
Yes.
and we think our senses are right. So you're wearing a blue t-shirt.
Yes.
If you asked me what color is the t-shirt, I would mechanically say it's blue.
Yes.
Actually, if I think about it, I will realize it is every color other than blue because it is reflecting the blue.
Right.
It is not blue. Whatever it is, neti, it is not blue.
Sure.
This table,
Yeah.
you ask me what is the shape of that table,
Yeah.
I will say a rectangle.
Rectangle.
But it is a rectangle only looked at from a certain point of view. Looked
That's
at
right.
from a completely different point
It
of
will
view,
be different.
it will not be a rectangle.
Yeah.
So because of our dependence on the senses,
Yes.
we just tend to take many things for granted.
Yeah.
Sanatan Dharma. Sanatan means something that has been going on for years and years and years. So it is
Yes.
eternal.
Quite right.
There is the notion of sadachar, which is good behavior.
Hmm.
Sadachar is extremely dependent on context, time, and space.
Hmm.
So, on this part of a certain geographical line, it may be okay for me to eat the meat of pigs.
Hmm.
On another side of that geographical line, it may be okay for me to eat the meat of cows. If it is Sanatan Dharma, it cannot be defined in terms of norms of good behavior,
Hmm.
which can change.
Hmm.
A lot of people say that, hey, look, Sanatan Dharma means you need to be vegetarian.
Hmm.
But vegetarianism is a luxury we have only after the invention of agriculture.
That's right.
Before the invention of agriculture, which is, let us say, 10,000 years ago, we ate whatever was available. We didn't have that luxury. So some of these things masquerade as dharma, but they are not dharma. Na tvang Ashtavakra, na tvang brahmanadikang na cha asrami na akshagochare. You are not brahmana and the other brahmanas because these are function of societal norms.
That's right.
You are not the ashramas of garastha, vanaprastha, brahmacharya and sannyasa. You are beyond all of this.
Finally, I find the end of the Ashtavakra Gita also really fascinating, because after this long conversation that Janaka and Ashtavakra have, it ends by saying, what is there even a need to say all of these things? Why even speak all this, right? So at its very end, it seems to negate even the need for Ashtavakra Gita, so to speak, or at the very least a conversation as detailed as Janaka and Ashtavakra have in the method or in the structure of a conversation. Even that is eliminated. I want you to reflect a little bit on this particular end of the Ashtavakra Gita, because it brings us to a point, almost as somebody once told me, almost it doesn't give me a clean, neat, to-do answer. It sort of leaves me even with one more final elimination.
It's sort of, there's a value judgment in asking that question.
Right.
By the way, we said earlier that the Ashtavakra Gita tells us nothing about the sage Ashtavakra or about Janaka.
That's right.
Ashtavakra, we normally understand him depicted with 8 crooked parts in
That's
his
right.
body.
Yeah.
It could actually be exactly the opposite. It could be that someone who was Ashtavakra, who was upright in 8 senses.
Correct.
Janaka, we know from other stories about Janaka,
Yes.
that everything in Mithila had burned down, in the capital of Videha had burned down, and when everything had burned down, Janaka was perfectly happy because all of his possessions had gone. I think the way to look at the Ashtavakra Gita, the reason I think the question is sort of a wrong question to ask,
Yes.
we are sort of presuming that the Ashtavakra Gita was written with a view to educate the rest of us.
Right.
It probably wasn't. It was simply a dialogue between Janaka and Ashtavakra which someone recorded. So just as this we are recording, we know that there is going to be a audience, a viewership who will watch this.
Yes.
But suppose we were just to have a chat
Have a chat.
on something else, and someone came along and recorded it.
Yeah.
I say, what is the message? Well, maybe there isn't supposed to be. We were just having a chat.
Wonderful. One of the fascinating journeys of having done this book, Life, Death and the Ashtavakra Gita, has been to really have this sort of a conversation that at the very least makes us think a little more deeply about our own existence. And it's been a rare privilege for me to associate with Dr. Bibek Debroy, Bibek Da, on this book, Life, Death and the Ashtavakra Gita. Vivek, thank you very much for
Thank
this
you.
conversation.
Thank you.